Thanks for being a part of today's study in the book of James. Today we're taking a second look at James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18, because there's no way to capture the insights of James in this passage with just one blog article. Today we're going to explore the wisdom from above, or God's wisdom. So let's read the verses. James 3, verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the fruit from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. Well, suppose there was a sacred store where we could go and purchase a parcel of wisdom. What would we get? Well, let's unwrap the wisdom package and see what's there. Well, the first word to describe God's wisdom is pure. Wisdom that comes from God will make us pure and will allow us to better see God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. The purity of God's wisdom is contrasted with the double-minded thinking of wisdom from below. The double-minded person does not fully trust God and only relies on God when every other option of our sensual or our own best thinking is exhausted. The pure wisdom person goes to God for direction at the very moment God's wisdom is needed. The next word is peaceable. When we fully rely on God for direction, He provides us with His peace. Isaiah wrote, "Those of steadfast mind you will keep in peace because they trust in you." Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. Don't miss how peace and trust are related in this verse. Not only does God give wisdom and peace, but He also makes us peacemakers. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." Matthew 6, verse 9. Another hallmark of God's wisdom is a willingness to yield our self-interest, to consider the concerns of other persons. And I've combined this aspect of God's wisdom with gentle, because the gentle or humble person is most apt to embrace a wise way of living that is willing to see the world from another person's point of view. Then we have full of mercy. Jesus was known to include people who were normally excluded. He lifted up those who were put down by society. When He did this, He frequently was criticized by the religious establishment. But Jesus could point to the changed lives of outcasts and say, "Nevertheless, wisdom is vindicated by all her children." Luke chapter 7, verse 35. God's wisdom in our lives will produce a wisdom that is merciful and one that includes and accepts all people. And then finally we end with partiality, or without partiality or hypocrisy. God's wisdom does not produce play actors who favor one kind of person over another. Rather, God's wisdom makes us genuine and able to see the value of everyone. Well, James began the topic of wisdom in verse 13 with these words, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom." He ended his message like this, "And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace." Verse 18. The wise person experiences the good life, a life that has received the gifts of wisdom mentioned above. This wise person is like a farmer who sows seeds of righteousness and peace among others. Well, as you well know, there is no wisdom store where we can pick up a pound or two of wisdom. However, God has given us His Holy Spirit to be our counselor, advocate, and guide. You may have been reminded of the fruit of the Spirit while you were reading or listening to what James said about wisdom. Paul wrote about this kind of life that the Spirit produces in people. He said, The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. Looking at the list of attributes of wisdom and the fruit of the Spirit, there are clear similarities, because the Spirit is the one who gives both the fruit and the wisdom we need. God does not expect us to produce the fruit of the Spirit or the attributes of wisdom on our own. Think about this little silly story. There was a man walking by a vegetable garden, and as he was walking by, he heard something that sounded like a groan. He turns only to hear a voice from the tomato vine. It says, "What's wrong with you? What are you looking at?" Well, the man looks around, thinking somebody's playing a prank on him, but there's no one there. Then he hears the voice again. It says, "Yeah, I'm talking to you. What's wrong with you?" Well, the man's still looking for the hidden camera, and he finally says, "I thought I heard groaning, and I stopped to see what's happening." "Right," said the voice from the vine. "You don't know how hard my life is. I am struggling and straining with all my power to produce a couple of beautiful, ripe tomatoes for my master." "I see," replied the man, thinking this was maybe the strangest conversation he'd ever had in his life. But before he could speak, the vine said, "Besides producing tomatoes, I also have to figure out a way to make some onions because my master wants to have him on his hamburger." Well, the man finally kneels down to whisper to the vine, thinking somebody's surely watching. And he says, "Hey, listen, silly vine, you don't have to struggle to produce a tomato. All you have to do is remain connected to the vine, and you'll get all the tomatoes you need." Well, that's the end of the story. Well, there is an actual point to this silly story. When we read the list of attributes of wisdom or of the fruit of the Spirit, it's tempting to say, "I really need patience or gentleness or some other item." And then we go about trying to obtain that part of wisdom or character of the Spirit. Like the tomato vine, we may attempt to struggle and strain using all of the resources that we have to produce this aspect of our character. Well, if the man in the garden were to kneel down and whisper to us, he would give us the same advice he gave to the vine. Just stay connected to the vine, and you will produce fruit. Possibly you recognize Jesus' words in this story, as Jesus said, "Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing." John chapter 15, verses 4 and 5. Well, the question is, how do we get into this abiding relationship with Jesus? And I think Mary, the mother of Jesus, is an excellent example of how abiding works. The story of Jesus' birth and Mary's reaction is a good picture of how to abide in a relationship that produces both wisdom and the fruit of the Spirit. In Luke chapter 1, Mary was told by the Holy Spirit that he would overshadow her life in the birth of her son. Here's how the angel spoke to her in Luke chapter 1, verse 35. The angel said, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child born to you will be holy. He will be called the Son of God." Well, the power of the Holy Spirit overshadows everyone who is seeking to abide in a relationship with Jesus. He is the one who will produce the fruit of love, joy, peace, and more. He is the one who will give us the pure, peaceable, gentle, and more again, wisdom from above. It may be well for us to picture the Spirit as a shadow over us, going with us throughout the day to give us everything that we need in life. Try thinking like that for a while, see what it does. And the second thing would be Mary's response. She was very quick to submit to the power and direction of the Spirit. So in Luke chapter 1, verse 38, we read, Mary said, "Here I am, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." So Mary was conscious of the Spirit's presence in her life, and she lived a life of simply accepting what the Spirit, who was always overshadowing her, allowed into her life. She assumed the role of a servant who was willing to do according to the direction of the Lord. If we follow Mary's example, we will live in an abiding relationship with Jesus through the Spirit. We can count on wisdom from above and the fruit of the Spirit becoming more and more evident in our lives. Why don't you pray with me, please? Dear God, we're in awe of you. You are willing to give us your Spirit to live with us and to produce in us both your wisdom and the fruit of the Spirit. We praise you and we say with Mary, Lord, here I am your servant. Well, thank you so much for being a part of today's study, and I hope you have a blessed day. God bless you.